I move that the following ordinance amendment be placed on the July 15th, 2020 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda. That'd be UZO Amendment number 97, Business Park and Gateway Directory Signs.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries.
I move that the following subdivision petition be placed on the July 15th, 2020 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda at petitioner's request. Placement thereon being without reference to compliance or non-compliance with the adopted subdivision ordinance. That would be S 4922, Blacker minor subdivision, minor sketch.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? That motion carries.
I move the following rezoning petitions be placed on the July 15th, 2020 Area Plan Commission public hearing agenda. Z 2796, Stephen D. Hobby, GB to R1B, and Z 2797, Reasons LLC, PDRS to R4W.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? That motion carries. Approval of the July ABZA agenda.
I move the following petitions be placed on the July 22nd, 2020 Area Board of Zoning Appeals public hearing agenda. BZA 1786, Janet and Richard W. Harlow Jr., previously known as Kreider & Kreider Incorporated. BZA 2038, Bill J. Phillips. BZA 1920, Purdy O'Neill Farms LLC. BZA 2039, Purdy O'Neill Farms LLC. BZA 40, Purdy O'Neill Farms LLC, and BZA 2041, Murtaugh Law LLC.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? That motion carries. Determination of variances, Lafayette Division.
I move the following request for variance from the Unified Zoning Ordinance are not requests for use variance prohibited from consideration by ordinance and statute. Case 2020-12, Jerry and Rachel Brand. Case 2020-13, the Cincinnati Group LLC by Chad S. Gibson, and case 2020-14, Edo LLC.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? That motion carries.
Regarding case 2020-14, Edo LLC, I move that the following sign section of the UZO be strictly adhered to.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Review and approval of the June budget report. Brian and Sally's absent. Or you'll discuss this at the meeting. Well, at the meeting. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. She'll be prepared to discuss next time.
Thank you. Other business, none. Gary, we'll take that motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
And we will pass the virtual gavel to Mr. Leverings. There we are.
Thank you, Jackson. Zach, do we need to wait a couple minutes or not?
Yeah, let's just wait about 3 minutes. I need to step out anyway. We'll give it about 2-3 minutes and we'll get started again.
Very good, thank you.
Larry, we don't have a script on this, but I am going to call a roll just for China's purposes whenever we get started.
I was going to ask you if you wanted to do that. Good. Are you ready?
Kathy, Ryan, are we recording, ready to go?
I'm ready.
Yeah, social media is up and running. We're ready to go.
Very good. All right, I will call this meeting of the Area Plan Commission Ordinance Committee on July 1st, 2020 to order. And Zach, if you want to go ahead and call the roll, please.
Sure thing. Gary Schroeder,
Present.
Jackson Bogan,
Present.
Vicky Pearl,
Present.
Tom Murtaugh, absent. Jerry Reynolds, Carl Griffin,
Here.
Greg Jones,
Present.
Larry Leverins,
Present.
and we do have a quorum. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Zach. First item of business is approval of the minutes from the June 3rd joint meeting of the Ordinance and Bylaws Committee.
I move that we approve the minutes from the June 3rd joint meeting of the Ordinance and Bylaw, that's June 3rd, 2020, joint meeting of the Ordinance and Bylaw Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Kathy, you want to bring us up to date on the small wind energy, I can't talk, small wind energy conversion systems for institutional uses, please.
Sure. So we've talked about this back in January and then again last month. Basically, the Tippecanoe School Corporation is interested in possibly installing small WECs or wind energy conversion systems on their properties, particularly out pretty far in the county. For example, Cole Elementary, which is pretty far to the south of Lafayette. I've got the slides that I sent to you a couple of weeks ago, just in case anyone has any questions about any of that. I don't know if you want me to run through them right now or not. Also, Bill Hutzel from Purdue, I'm not sure if he's listening or available.
Yes, I'm on the line.
Okay. So it's my understanding that Bill is the one that contacted TSC regarding the possibility of using WECs. So you might want to ask him some questions. So.
Or maybe I could jump in and give just a brief background and maybe base the questions on that if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm a faculty member in mechanical engineering technology. I deal with the design of net zero energy buildings. I'm not a utility energy person, but I would describe myself as a practitioner looking at next generation buildings and how they interact with the grid. So I was working with James Cole Elementary, Tippecanoe School Corporation. I was actually I'm a faculty member, so I was leading a team of students that was involved in a competition. And basically our charge was to take a look at James Cole with TSC and make recommendations on what it would take to make a kind of a unique existing building net zero energy. And so to define what I mean, net zero energy means that you've got a property that on an annual basis provides as much energy as it takes from the grid. So initially when we were in the early stages, I'm talking September, October of 2019, looking at James Cole, looking at the amount of land that was available, we were thinking, well, possibly a combination of solar and wind would make a lot of sense for James Cole Elementary. And we learned, and that's when we initially contacted the Area Planning Commission because we were aware of some of the new regulations. I'll make it brief, and maybe that'll be the impetus for questions. But what we found was the cost of solar photovoltaics, the type of panels that you're seeing around the state, have dropped to the point where that is much more cost competitive than wind. So it's not just any wind though. So the small wind is wind on the size of what you see at the bus station in downtown Lafayette. That's in the 50 to 100 kilowatt range. Those are not cost competitive with the typical solar panels that you see around. Now, the much larger wind systems that you see in Benton County that are in the megawatt size, those are very cost effective, but that's an order of magnitude bigger than something that you would need at a school. So there's also things that you may or may not be relevant on net metering regulations in Indiana that has to do with how you're compensated for putting energy onto the grid. That had a lot of impact on our conversations, but I could speak more about the design for James Cole and how it could be net zero, but without knowing too much more about your focus, I think I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Gary here, I have a question. Hey, Bill,
Yeah.
talked about the cost of the solar panels coming down and kind of the wind not being cost effective. Do you calculate a payback on those solar panels? And I
Yeah,
know
so the payback that we had for the here in Indiana was on the order of 12 years. So the capacity of the system at James Cole would be on the order of 300 kilowatts. It would cost on the order of $600,000 based on the rate that they use electricity at James Cole. Somewhere in the 12 to 15 year range is when you'd see a payback. And there's going to be a lot more schools looking at that because that's pretty attractive because solar panels are typically guaranteed to perform for 25 years. So at basically when you hit the midpoint of the panel's life, if you're getting your electricity for free, up until recently, that was attractive for a lot of school districts. So for example, Frontier in Brookston, just north of us, is putting solar panels in. And I'm aware of at least 20 projects throughout the state that, based on similar logic, they're thinking of solar, not so much net zero energy as a goal, but basically having a solar field at the school to offset the energy expenses. Another fact that you might be interested in, that you may already know, is that next year, Tippecanoe School Corporation is looking at an electric rate increase of 16%. Those of you that get the Journal and Courier saw that residential rates are projected to go up by about 6% next year, but it's going to be more significant for schools and businesses of that size. And that's what's driving Tippecanoe School and other school districts to say, what's a better option? And based on what I know, they're almost all, based on the energy demand that they have, they are not looking at megawatt sized wind turbines. They're not looking at the 50 to 100 kilowatt scale wind turbines because they're not as cost effective either. Based on what I know, it's typically solar fields these days because the prices come down.
Carl Griffin here, Bill. So in terms of the consultation that you would give to the school corporation, you would at this point be actually pointing them towards solar rather than WEX. Is that what I'm understanding is sort of the, there's a transition,
yes,
there's a transition here that's happening.
Sorry, yeah, achieve the best payback, you want to look to solar and not wind based on the amount of energy that they use. Another insight that you have to kind of understand the problem or the opportunity, put it that way. Indiana has kind of a unique net metering structure. So net metering is the rate that utilities compensate people that put electricity onto the grid. And in Indiana, when you put electricity onto the grid, you're compensated at the cost of generation, which is substantially less than the retail rate, the amount that you pay when you pay your electric bill. So there's one part of the equation is that there's very little incentive for a school or a business to put an oversized renewable energy field, whether it be solar or wind, on their property, and attempt to sell energy back to the grid, because the rate that they get is relatively low.
Thank you, Bill. So Kathleen and Larry or other staff as indicated. So this, it sounds to me, is I'll say this takes the pressure off of us reconsidering the WEX question. Is that right?
Yes, I would agree with that. Solar panels are permitted by right now. So, Bill, and what I'm hearing that we don't really need this amendment?
Yeah, again, I'm not a policy person. I'm more of an engineer, but if I'm working with school districts and trying to counsel them on a cost-effective way to manage their school, step number one, what I would do is work with them on energy efficiency initiatives. So things like motion detectors and LED lightings and replacing old cooling systems at James Cole, that had less than a 3-year payback. It was actually closer to a 2-year payback. So that's step number one. Step number two is looking at renewable energy sources, and it would have to be solar as opposed to wind at this point. Now, not to say it couldn't change in the future, but that's exactly what I would counsel them on.
Carl Griffin again. So Bill, just first, I'll say information's sake. So, so how large a system? So will it be relatively easy for your typical middle school, elementary school, whatever, to size their solar needs in such a way that is this going to be done on the building? Will they need to have some green space in some proximity to the building to do this? How large an area is typically needed for doing this and getting the payback that you're talking about in the 12 to 15 years?
That's a good question. So first of all, James Cole is a really unique building that when it was designed in the 80s, it has many energy efficiency features that you wouldn't think of today. For example, if you've been out there, it's an earth berm school. So it's built into the ground. So it's heating and cooling loads are less. It's also heated with a geothermal heat pump, which is, in my line of work, kind of the holy grail for energy efficiency. So what I'm getting at is its energy demand is relatively low. But to get right to your question, James Cole sits, these rural schools that sit on significant amounts of land. If I remember right, James Cole owns about 30 acres of land. And to provide all of their energy needs, they need on the order of two acres of solar panels would get to the break-even point where they're using electricity. And again, as I said earlier, there's no incentive to feed lots of electricity into the grid because you're not compensated. So in the 2 acre range. So the rule of thumb that we use is for a megawatt of solar electricity here in Indiana, you need on the order of 6 acres of land, give or take, just round numbers. So they're about a third of that, and that's how I'm getting my roughly 2 acre estimates. So they've got any school that's got, acres of land would make sense. And I'd also say this: James Cole, solar panels have to be oriented facing south, and James Cole has this perfect south facing roof. As a matter of fact, that school, since it's sunk into the ground, is mostly roof. So it even has the opportunity to put solar panels on the roof if you wanted to. However, if you're looking at cost, if you can put them on the ground, they're cheaper to install and cheaper to maintain. So that would be your preference.
Thanks, Bill. That's helpful.
Bill,
Hey, Kat.
this is Larry Leverins. Is there a place in the county if this amendment, for example, would be good for the entire county? Are there places in the county that are absolutely not applicable for wind energy, or are there places that are not necessarily applicable for solar that would be applicable for wind? If someone wanted to go that direction, I mean, is wind at all a player here in the county as far as small systems are concerned?
So I haven't looked at wind in great detail, but I can tell you that in 2010, the Tippecanoe School Corporation sponsored a wind survey specifically looking at James Cole. And that is basically a situation where they can look at maps, and they also installed sensors to look at the wind speed. So you're looking at I don't have the data in front of me, but I think you have the wind at a height of 10 meters, and then you might go up to 20 meters or maybe 15 meters. Long story short, James Cole had the wind resource in a good and above range. So it's a reasonable place to put a wind turbine. It's just that since 2010, the price of small solar has come down more aggressively. But I should also kind of stop and say, I haven't looked at the whole county in terms of wind. Another thing that you might be interested in, if anybody has driven on 231, you'll see close to Purdue, the Purdue Airport, there's a 1.6 megawatt solar farm. So one of the ways to get solar built these days, if Tippecanoe School went to put in wind, they assume the risk of owning that wind farm. But Duke and other entities will come in and assume the risk and the cost of installing a solar array, and the land where it sits, they get whether it be Tippecanoe School Corporation or Purdue University, it's basically a leasing arrangement where the money is made based on the solar array sited on the land, and it's not so much the kilowatt hours of electricity. So I know you're getting the long-winded answer here, but I wanted to make sure if any of this is relevant to get it out there.
Oh, that's fine,
Kathy,
thank you.
I have a question, Kathy. It's Vicky.
Yes.
So didn't some of this start, or am I confusing something with one of the towers that went up 9th or 18th Street for something we approved, or am I getting something confused?
Are you thinking of the water tower that was planned on?
Oh, maybe that's what it was. Okay, never mind.
One other piece of information that you might be interested in is in 2013, Southwest Middle School in Mentone, when they were hit by that tornado, that school had recently put in a wind tower of, I think it was on the order of 50 kilowatts. That storm that took out the gym and part of the school, it also damaged the wind turbine enough that the physical structure was still up, the generator was damaged, and the school never could find somebody to recommission that properly. They ultimately decommissioned the wind turbine. So that what I'm trying to get at is that risk when a school, and by the way, that storm would have wreaked havoc on solar panels as well. It's not exclusively wind, but there's a risk when a school corporation fronts, say, $600K to put either solar or wind on their property.
This is Jerry Reynolds, Lafayette City Council also. We've discussed this, and I think the city's position is at the present time, and thanks to the staff for the mapping that you laid out, that we may be inclined to look deeper into solar than we would the wind, because our residential areas, I don't think are going to be very happy with the wind turbines.
I'll throw in, since Jerry brought it up, I'll throw in that we haven't had our pre-council meeting, which is tomorrow, but West Lafayette council members and the mayor are very much in favor of the amendment as it stands. But at the same time, we were lacking this information that we got tonight as well. So as far as renewable energy and that kind of thing, West Lafayette is very open to that. So that's just an information.
I think we're open, but I think that we're kind of not looking at the wind side of it. I think the solar side would benefit us a lot. And I think if you open this up to fire stations and libraries and so on, I think it would let more people take advantage of the solar system than it would be the wind, especially in the residential areas where they're going to affect a lot of neighborhoods.
So Kathy,
Go ahead, Larry.
Go ahead.
Well, but in fact, nothing needs to be done to allow solar to happen at fire stations, et cetera, et cetera. Am I correct from your earlier comment?
That's correct.
Well, so does this become a point that we want to return to the back burner, or do we need to wrestle with this now? Have we wrestled it enough?
In light of the new information, do we want to press pause and see if there's even a need or a want for this right now?
I would agree with you, Jackson. I think that we should maybe investigate a little bit more into it, because as we sit right now, I like the solar. I really do. I know what we have at the bus company, and there's just not many people that's very in favor of that.
Kathy, this is Vicky. I apologize. It's saying that a request was made. Well, it's like, well, if this request was made, how do we get clear to the other side of it? So who brought the request, or that we started down this path?
It came from
I can jump in. I think I was at least one that contacted Larry early on in our look at James Cole. I didn't know then what I knew now, and so I was at least one of the people that raised the question.
Bill, would you be comfortable with us pressing pause on this at this stage and revisiting if you feel that you and TSC or whoever wants to come back to it? I mean, we can only bring it back up should need be.
If you're asking me, I'm fine. Again, when I'm working for a customer or a client, I want to go with the most cost-effective option. If something like wind comes down in price, or solar goes up in price, we would revisit it at that time. But as of 2020, you wouldn't, if you're trying to be as cost-effective as possible, you'd go with solar.
Thank you for that.
Well, I think that as people on this committee who consider it our responsibility to facilitate energy effective methods and allow those to happen in our community, I think that there's an onus on us to look at this. But as Jerry and others have said, and I would be one also, who I look back upon my yes vote to the when the bus company requested that, and I mean, I think that we learned, even though they're there, and I think that our community learned something about that, which in some ways was not a really expensive way to learn that perhaps we don't want to have. That it's good that we are now being able to look at alternatives, such as Bill has presented to us, and I think that I would be very comfortable in leaving this alone, since it looks like from the cost and risk benefit categories here that there's an alternative that is very suitable. and that's what we would encourage our communities to move towards is solar rather than wind.
If
I
that was a
agree with
motion,
you.
I would say
So what's the pleasure of the group? Do we need we need I guess, a motion to do something here with this.
I move that we have, that we can at this time discontinue our assessment of the need to, discontinue our reassessment of WEX units for Tippecanoe County, and only come back to this if a need arises in the future to reconsider.
Second.
I second. Go ahead.
we've got 3 seconds.
All right. Does anyone have any more discussion on this? Kathy, is that reasonable that basically we have something sitting here and we file it? If there's a request that comes forward, then we bring it out and consider it again.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We'll be ready to go in the future.
Okay.
And we presently have no public comment on this item.
Very good. Thanks, Brian.
Well, this is Liz Solberg from the League of Women Voters. I would just say we did submit a comment last time. Maybe a question might be to be in touch with the staff person at TSC who made the request and be sure that I was very interested in what got presented, so I'm not questioning that at all. But perhaps I think the motion is fine as is, but maybe Kathy, just a little staff check with who came forward and what they're thinking about would be logical. This would not be the reason to go ahead with the big wind thing, but there is an educational benefit also in terms of these things. And of course, there's always the option of, Jerry, of if this did all go past and everything, your jurisdiction, the city of Lafayette, doesn't have to pass it, so that it wouldn't apply in the city of Lafayette. It would just apply in the residential zones that are outside of the city. So anyway, thank you all for this great consideration, and the League is very supportive of renewable energy, and we will keep listening to your debates on this. We do think about, our state senator is trying to change that net metering situation too, so that could change in the future too. Probably not while the legislature is trying to figure how it comes together and finances and COVID and all that, but in the future that might be an issue that comes up that would make this a little more favorable.
Thank you. Any other comments? Zach, we have a motion on the floor. Would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. When I call your name, please signify yes in favor of this motion to drop this off the agenda for until a later date, as Carl stated, or no. Gary Schroeder,
Yes.
Jackson Bogan,
Yes.
Vicky Pearl,
Yes.
Tom Murtaugh, absent. Jerry Reynolds,
Yes.
Carl Griffin,
Yes.
Greg Jones,
Yes.
Larry Leverance.
Yes.
7 votes in favor, 0 votes against.
Thank you, Zach. Kathy, business park signage, please.
Yes, we talked about this last month and you requested that I put it together in amendment format, which I have done. It's in your packet for tonight's meeting. The only real change I made was in the definition of business park, where it specified how big a business's permitted monument sign can be. Previously, we limited the monument sign to equal 25% of the business's total allotment of signage. I thought that was a little too strict, so I changed it to they may have no more than one monument sign equal to up to 50% of the business's total allotment of signage. That way it's more flexible. If the business wants to put up a 50% or use 50% of its signage for monument sign, they can, or they can make it a 25% big sign or 30%, whatever. I just thought that was a little better than the original idea. So here's what the ordinance would look like. Brand new definition of business park. We don't have a definition for business park right now. So this is what we would add, as well as a definition of a gateway directory sign. And then we would also change the way we calculate signage on businesses. Right now, if a business has 3 or 4 street frontages, they can calculate each one of those frontages within their sign allotment, and they would get a big amount of signs. So now we would like to limit that to just 2 street frontages. So that's this change. And then this is the number of freestanding signs per sign lot. Right now, the way it's worded, you get 1 sign per road frontage, which we think can be a little ridiculous sometimes. So we'd like to change that to 1 freestanding sign per 2,000 total linear feet of frontage. There we go. And then we also have 2 new charts for gateway directory signs. These are the big, like an integrated center sign, sort of, except it's for a business park. And this would tell them how big the sign can be and how tall the sign can be. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and then section 5. That's just another part of the ordinance where it talks about how to calculate signage. So we're just fixing it there as well.
Kathy, can you take us back to the first definition or the first piece of the presentation? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So all right. So there's the business park, and so to clarify our previous discussion, or remind me of it. So what this is essentially saying is that if I am a business in the business park, that I may dedicate up to 50% of my total allowable signage. I may have it out there on the gateway directory sign. Is it? Nope.
No.
Okay.
No.
So clarify there, please.
Yeah, the 50 up to 50% of the business's total allotment of signage could be used as a monument sign on your actual lot.
Okay.
So we don't calculate the signage on the gateway directory sign. That's not counted towards your sign allotment. That's in addition to it.
Okay. All right, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Okay, so this is on the agenda for the July APC meeting.
Correct.
Anything, Zach, do we need a motion to take it forward? It's already forwarded.
It's forward. I think what they probably want to know from you guys is what the vote of the committee is, in favor, against. It's already on the agenda, so we're going to consider, no matter what. But my guess is the full APC probably want to hear your thoughts and what the vote was. They usually ask that anyway.
Okay. Let's get a motion then to send this on to APC and get our recommendation.
I move that.
Second.
I have a discussion item, Larry. We can do it now that it's on the floor.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. And I did talk to Kathy about this, and this came up at the last meeting about the speedway at 38 in Creasy. And obviously 38's a four-lane road running east-west. Creasy's 4-lane running north-south. And they have two signs kind of out on the corner that are perpendicular to each other, one facing the 38 traffic and one facing the Creasy Lane traffic. They're not extremely large, but I did go look at those. I sent Kathy a picture, and I had to use Google Maps so I could see them both at the same time, but really only one sign is visible depending on which road you're on. And with the change, I think Kathy said that those would not be allowed. And to me, I think that for that particular corner, that's appropriate signage to let traffic know that, you know, what people want to see. Basically, they have, here's our gas price. And so I guess I'm rethinking section 3, where you only have 2,000 opposed to just leaving it the way it is. Now, there is some risk. I think she brought up the CVS, where it really has 4. It's kind of a unique site in town. I'm not sure. I mean, they're pretty rare. I mean, it can happen, but, and I think they only use 2 signs. So I guess for that particular, it's hard to say. I mean, there are your corner signs, and that you have traffic both ways, 26 and Creasy, same thing. And I'm not sure the signage there. My guess is Lowe's has 2 signs, you know, one on Creasy and one on 26. But I would be.
I don't think so.
Pardon me? I would be in
think.
favor.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'd be in favor of leaving section 3 the way it is, I guess, and just, I don't think the risk is very, very big. Signs are expensive to put up, signs are expensive to maintain, and I think the businesses, you know, have to calculate where they want to put their signage and what's valuable to them. And I think the Speedway signs are appropriate. They're not extremely large. Okay, Kathy, I'm done.
So is the same, can the same thing, so Gary, can the same thing be accomplished by making it so that both directions of traffic can see this by a diagonal sign, you know, placed somewhere close to the intersection?
I don't think so, because I've seen those where they put them on the corner and you really can't see them until you're up in the intersection where you look over, and that's really not the time that you want to be looking around. And as I'm driving through those intersections, they're pretty busy, and you just, I mean, I looked and I had to turn around and go back. And then when I got home, I got on Google and drove down the road using Google Maps, and I was able to see those because I can stop and turn. And when you have a busy intersection, you know, you want to see those signs when you're, you know, 300-400 feet away from the intersection, because when you're entering the intersection, I think your focus needs to be on driving, not trying to look over and see what the gas prices are.
Gary, real quick, I think you and I spoke about this briefly. Is this the type of item, the Speedway as an example, that would they have had to file for a variance?
No, I think Kathy said, not to speak for her, but those were allowed by right.
Okay.
Right.
With this section 3 change, they would not be allowed by right, and they would have to
Right.
do it.
Kathy, could then they do by, could they do something by exception or by variance or something?
Yes, they could.
So there's an option there for them to get that sign if they so desire.
Yes, they could apply for a variance.
But basically what we're talking about doing is taking away their right to a number of signs, same square footage, if they wanted to make it smaller signs and just have 2 of them versus 1 larger one. Is that kind of my understanding?
We would take away their ability to have 1 sign per each road frontage. So they would just get one sign unless they were to get a variance.
So Gary, let's play a scenario out here that I think may be informative for the ordinance committee and possibly also for the APC in general. So we leave this the way the red ink says. Okay, you get one per 2,000 linear feet. Okay, so your company, you decide you really want to have two, and it's going to cost more and it's going to take time and so forth to go ahead through the variance process. But you go ahead and you take this to the BZA. And how long have you been on the Board of Zoning Appeals, Gary?
10, 15 years.
Okay, you got a couple on me. And so if you think back over similar arguments that have been presented to the BZA, do you tend to think that the members of the BZA would allow this variance, or this would be a variance, right, Council?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Kathy.
it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be, and it's probably, remember, we have policy provisions in our ordinance about sign changes, so it will probably come with, most likely, a recommendation that the sign variance be adhered to.
Yeah,
But yes,
I've heard that said a couple of times. So Gary, do you think that this would be, as a rule, as a generality, do you think that this would get through with an affirmative vote by the BZA members?
Well, this one would be in the city, I believe, and I think that depends on the members of the zoning commission at the time. And not to stray off from your question, but we write a signed ordinance that we think is reasonable, and we read it every time. We want to strictly adhere to our sign ordinance. It's just kind of maybe a conflict in my own mind that you write something and say, well, you can just go get a variance. But on the other hand, when they go get a variance, the staff is not going to recommend approval. I mean, they're going to tell.
The staff isn't, absolutely. But in my experience, and maybe I'm not remembering this right, but and maybe what you're saying is there's just not enough information to make a prediction here. I guess what I was driving at was that I thought that there would be a tendency for the BZA to approve this, and that if we're going to approve it anyway, then why make them come for a variance?
I agree. I'm sorry, Carl, didn't know where you were going, but yes, I would agree with that. Yes, I think they would in this case. We don't approve all signs, as you know. I think we're pretty diligent, reasonable, but we turn some down. But good point, Carl.
Kathy, do you have any examples of where the current ordinance is being abused? So why this change?
Yeah. Well, I kind of disagree with what Gary said about that speedway at 38 and Creasy. I feel like I can clearly see both of those signs at the same time, which means why do we have two signs there? I feel like that's not necessary. It's sort of overkill. Also, the CVS on Union and 18th, it's actually got 4 frontages, and it's got at least 2 freestanding signs that really is not necessary.
Yeah, I guess.
I would also, let me just also say, there are times it's rare, but there are times we recommend approval of variances, sign variances even, but there has to be a reason. There has to be some compelling reason that the ordinance is working a hardship on that property. We don't see it often, but occasionally, yes.
Yeah, I guess one of my thoughts, and I gotta agree with Gary a little bit, when you buy a piece of real estate that is valued at X because it's sitting on a very busy spot, you probably want to highlight what it is that you're putting there. MDS or something along those lines. And
Well, and sorry, go
ahead.
ahead, Jackson.
No, you're good.
Well, and to tag along to that, I guess I feel like if it's easy for us to say because we live here, but I think of myself traveling in Indy or somewhere you're not familiar with and you're trying to find these places. That's much different than when you're in your own town. I appreciate what we're trying to accomplish, but that's different than when we're driving around and we already know where the locations are.
With that, I'll make a motion to keep section 3 as is. And how do I say this? To
You're
remove
making,
section 3.
Jackson, you're going to have to make an amendment. There's an motion on the floor, so you're amending the motion on the floor.
Okay, I would like to amend the motion on the floor to changing section 3 back to the current way the ordinance was written.
Second.
Okay, and just for clarity, guys, so Larry, you're gonna call for a vote to first amend it,
Right.
and then we're gonna vote on that. And Kathy, just for my sake, what has packets went out to APC, right?
Yes. No,
Okay.
no, no, no.
So,
No, the packets have not gone out.
No, they have not.
Right.
okay. So this can be then changed and still get out to APC. There's just a holder, there's a hold item on the agenda.
Yeah. So it already went to the newspapers, but it was a very general legal ad that signage was going to be amended, basically.
I think it makes it easier then. So I think based on this, let's do a vote to amend the motion on the floor. Then we'll vote to pass. Yep.
Can we discuss real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to spell out that one of the reasons we wanted to change this was that Culver's that's coming on that Sagamore Park Center, it's going to have 3 frontages. They're going to be allowed 3 freestanding signs. I'm not sure. That was one of the reasons we wanted to change this. I just wanted to say that.
Won't they still have to be within the allotted sign square footage? I mean, if they want to use their signage on all of their signage on freestanding signs versus putting it on their building.
Yeah, I suppose if the Gateway Directory sign gets put up first in that business park, then it would be a business park and then it would just get 1 monument sign.
But regardless, even if it didn't, they would still have to adhere to the square footage allotment. And if they wanted to use that square footage allotment on 3 freestanding signs, which.
Yeah, it would just be 1 less variance they'd have to get.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready?
Any other? All right. So I'm going to call voice vote. We need to, I want to do it by voice vote in case there's any dissension. But what we're voting on right now is to modify the motion on the floor, which is passing this on to APC with a recommendation. And the modification is going to be to change section 3 from what is on your screen back to what it originally was. Correct, Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Gary?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we got a motion, a second to amend the motion on the floor. I'm going to call voice vote. Yes or no in favor. Gary Schroeder,
Yes.
Jackson Bogan,
Yes.
Vicky Pearl,
Yes.
Tom Murtaugh absent, Jerry Reynolds,
Yes.
Carl Griffin. Carl, are you still here? You might have. Greg Jones,
Yes.
Larry Leverance.
Yes.
So we'll call that 6 votes in favor, 1 abstain, but the motion passes. So now the motion on the floor has been amended. And you guys are voting to pass this on with the change we just made to full APC at the July meeting. Any further discussion?
I have one question, and without reading that, Kathy, since we made that change, is that cohesive with the rest of the changes? I see down under 5, it talks about not to exceed 2. Will that affect section 3? Or is everything else okay?
Well, section 5 has to do with the sign area that's permitted. So I hate to say this, but I suppose without section 3, you might as well get rid of section 5.
Okay, do we need a motion on that? That's what I thought. They are tied together then.
Well, one has to do with the number of freestanding signs you get, and one has to do with the amount of signage you're permitted on the sign lot.
Okay. Well, I would move then section 5 to make the ordinance, I guess, not in conflict, to make no changes to section 5.
I think it would also be section 2.
In section 2, okay. Section 2 is gateway, up to 2, you mean remove the up to 2? Or is that in the gateway portion?
No, section 2 is just changing the number of street frontages used to calculate sign area. Section 2 and section 5 are sort of tied together. They both do the same thing.
And Gary, as you make that motion, you might add and to pass on to the full APC, then we don't have to keep doing these one-off edits.
Okay, I move to amend the motion to remove the, is that all the changes in section 2 and the changes in section 5, Kathy?
Oh, wait a second.
You have gateway directory signs.
Yeah, this is going to be complicated. We need to remove where it says up to 2 right here.
Okay,
That change and this change here, but this would stay the same.
okay. So to amend the motion and to move on to the full commission, remove up to 2 in 2 places in section 2, and also remove the changes in section 5.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Zach, you want to call the roll, please?
Yep, one last time. So when I call your name, yes or no in favor, Gary Schroeder,
Yes.
Jackson Bogan,
Yes.
Vicky Pearl,
Yes.
Tom Murtaugh absent, Jerry Reynolds,
Yes.
Carl Griffin. Carl is voting yes via chat function because he's having audio difficulties. Greg Jones,
Yes.
Larry Leverance.
Yes.
All right, so 7 votes in favor of Kathy making those changes and then recommending pass onto the full APC commission. That item is already listed on the July agenda. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Do we have any citizens' comments? Is Ryan still on? Oh, there's Ryan.
Yeah, no social media comments.
Okay. You want to, let me take 30 seconds and if you get any.
Okay, stand by. No further comments.
Thank you, Ryan. With no other business, take a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.